First, bit of wild weather, not just what happened in Sydney. In fact, as we speak, about 20,000 homes in and around the southeast of Queensland currently in a world of pain with actually no power whatsoever. The Courier Mail's front page referring to what was a tornado or something similar to it. Now, obviously, that's people's descriptions of it, not an official readout from the Weather Bureau. But a huge change in temperature today meant that there was a big storm. As we speak, plenty of people are just double-checking the damage, but at the very least, this is the latest that we got from the authorities in Queensland.
Very much indicative of a very energetic atmosphere as well, fuelled by very unstable conditions around the Darling Downs especially, and even parts of the South Burnett could see some severe storms this afternoon evening.
I mentioned it when we were on the air last night, but what about that storm in Sydney? If you happen to live through it, like millions of people did, you know how frightening it was. For everyone else, you can have a look at the pictures. Lightning strikes, one of 73,000 that took place in and around New South Wales, as that storm was rolling its way from west to east. As I told you, a person has died as a result of a tree falling on their car in Cowra. About 100,000 people ending up without power at some point in time in the past 24 hours. But I want you to see again, that's 73,000 lightning strikes. This was, I think, from the Weather Zone people, and it was up on the Herald's website, but worth showing you. 73,000 lightning strikes, bang, 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 in and around all of Sydney. Now, I double-checked with the Rural Fire Service about whether any of these resulted in fires that would have obviously been instantly put out when it comes to rain in some parts. But, as we know, lightning can start fires, and with strong winds, all the rest of it. At this moment, there is no sign of anything other than what has passed in the past 24 hours. The clean-up job, pretty massive.
Here in Beecroft, the rain has still been bucketing down this morning. SES crews hard at work, working to clear one of more than 2,200 jobs that have been called in across the state.
So, summer, you may say, but what specifically this summer is causing what happens? The joy of this network is that we've got a weather channel who can tell us.
That rainfall is just going to continue thanks to that low pressure system offshore, and we will continue to see those storms throughout Friday, Saturday, and even into Sunday.
But something is really fascinating at times like this. As always, we admire the professional people that are involved in the emergency services in every part of this country. But I also admire the many thousands more who are part of our response to storms big and small, to fires big and small, to car accidents, to all sorts of things. The volunteers who work for the State Emergency Services or the Rural Fire Service or the Country Fire Authority, whatever the version is in your particular state. Now, these people, on top of their normal life, where they've got their families and they've got their jobs and they've got everything else, in the middle of the night, phone goes off, bang, they jump, they go too. No financial return. It is only when there are extreme events, and this happens every few years, where an awful lot goes on for an awful lot of days, and sadly a lot of people lose their lives, that there's some sort of parade in the street or major thank you. But I want to be very clear that we thank every day the people who volunteer their time or work professionally to go towards people in a time of need. Now, these are all statements of fact, all obvious things to mention, all things that we know, and there's a very good chunk that quite a few people watching us right now, either currently or at some point in their life, know somebody or were the somebody who has been doing the volunteering, working the hoses, working the chainsaws, all the rest of it. But there are other people in the media who seemingly forget about this volunteer spirit. Now, there's a lefty who writes in the Turnbull Times, otherwise known as The Guardian, and she has moved to a regional area, and apparently there was a little bit of a spot fire, and it caused quite a panic where she lives. I'm glad the fire is out, everyone's okay, this is not a na-na about that. But it's what she wrote about this experience of a community coming to her aid that kind of made me think, what world do you live in, mate? She says that after the fire had been there, all these people sort of came out of the woodwork. So many people materialised as if by matter transporter. sort of like being beamed in Star Trek style. They arrived in their utes on the back of trucks. They seemed to appear out of the scrub. I really don't know how. They worked spraying water on the flames and wedge-tail eagles rose above the paddocks to pick off the wildlife fleeing from the melee. That's how it went hour after hour. They came and went from the road, working with chainsaws, in bulldozers, on fire trucks, in their own utes, the volunteers, and a whole collection of people who had obviously focused in and around the paddock where it was all taking place. How's this a surprise to anyone? How is this a surprise to anyone whose job it is, in part, to comment on regional Australia? This is what happens. This is what has forever happened in Australia. Now, while many publications want to talk about what the cause of the intensity is or how things can be done to potentially avoid those intensities, the reality is that as long as there has been humans in Australia, they have gathered together to try to manage the land. Of most recent years, when our tools have got better and our capacity to get to a fire faster, as soon as you see smoke in a regional area, if you're safe, if your property's safe, you head to the place where it is because you can help put it out. Because you don't want anyone to go through the travesty that is a fire. But again, I get back to this worldview of this person writing for The Guardian who, very florid writer, I'm sure is a lovely person and I'm glad that they're okay? But what about this bit? In the end, the whole week reminded me that though the world may be a challenging place in 2025, none of those people cared how we voted. They just turned up, leaving their families behind on a public holiday to give hours and days of their lives to put the fire out at someone else's place. There but for the grace of God, etc. Because you don't talk about that in The Guardian. Because of them, no people or animals, buildings were lost. Those volunteers gave me perspective. They gave me hope. Well, I'm glad you got the hope now. But why did you or anyone else need this reminder? When it floods, you do not care about what anyone in the vicinity of you who you can help thinks about any issue in the world. I would believe that 99.999999% of people, that even if they were at war with their neighbour and something was going on where their house was a threat, they would try to save their neighbour, let alone the people who help complete strangers. It's what we as humans and decent humans do, but it's something in particular that our version of this in Australia is nothing new. But it's breaking news to people who write in some parts of the Australian media. Now, again, I'm glad you learnt the lesson. My point here is that there should have been no lesson to learn. While people who work for The Guardian would hate every word of anything that I say on this program for as long as I have been on the television, that would not prevent me or anyone else from trying to put a fire out in their backyard or trying to save their life if I was in proximity to be able to do so, or to save their property. I would hope it to be vice versa. I would trust that it is vice versa. But some people get so wrapped up in this concept of this side, that side, left versus right, that somehow there's some giant emotional moat between humans that means we won't take care of each other because of what we believe. And yes, there are parts of the world that have war and have sectarian... None of that's in Australia. None of that is in Australia. It is in part why the conversations of the past couple of years have been so focused about making sure that regardless from where you come from, what family connections you have, what other flag you may call your own in terms of your past, the only one that matters is ours. About our collective humanity, which is on show every single day. It's on show when you call 000. It's on show if a volunteer is the nearest person to help you, and it is on show when a stranger is close enough to be able to help, I'm glad this person learnt their lesson. I'm sure there will be a series of angry get squares from other people at their publication. This is not about that. It's just about someone who was surprised that we help each other. Yeah, that's what we do. We've always done it.